This Resident Evil is really taking the franchise to a whole new level. It's so much more exciting character-wise, actor-wise. We've gotten such an amazing cast of people. The stunts have just gone off the rails. I mean, literally. You know, it's in 3D, which is making this movie just come to life in a way that none of the other films can even pretend to, because it's sucking the audience in. And we are using this 3D technology to its fullest potential. It is just the most action-packed, the most crazy, just full-on experience that you can imagine from a Resident Evil movie.
The writing of the script is almost like an extended pre-production period for me. So I'm actually, while I'm writing the script, I'm thinking about how I'm going to achieve these images and how these are actually going to be put on screen. For example, on this movie, I was writing a 3D movie. So I was thinking about what the 3D would look like, what would strengthen the 3D effect while I was writing the screenplay. And, you know, if you think that screenplay writing process probably takes 6 to 9 months, that's a lot. There's no director in the world who gets 9 months worth of pre-production before he goes and shoots a film. I get that partly is by being the screenwriter. You know, I get all that extra time to kind of think about what the movie's going to look like. And I think that's one of the reasons why the movies have a very, very distinct style to them, is because that style is, you know, planned out way ahead of us actually getting on the set and starting to shoot.
Umbrella is obsessed with Alice because she bonded with this T virus and it gave her these superpowers. So, of course, they all want what she has. So, and they try and make the clones, but none of them are exactly who she is. So, this kind of obsession with trying to get the real Alice is constantly ongoing, to try and figure out what's so special about her and how can they take that for themselves.
So let's see the in position on this 27. We look at each other. All right. Three, two, one.
I think, the progression that Alice has made in the last 3 films before this one, she was always quite a badass. And she's been trained as a soldier, as a fighter in the very beginning, but then she got these superpowers from this T virus, and that kind of shot her into this whole new world of stunts and amazing acrobatics and things. More really than that, because Alice always could do the crazy stunts, but these psychic abilities that she has, that's really took it to the next level. But on a personal level, I love to fly. I love to do stunts. I really get a kick out of it. It feels, uh, like I'm superhuman when I'm able to do these. So it's a part of the process that I really enjoy, even though it's hard and it's uncomfortable. But it gets me up there doing these amazing things, and I just love it. It's really like a dream come true to be able to go up there and fly and do these amazing gymnastics in the air.
Mila's stunt doubles on Resident Evil 4 are two fabulous girls, twin sisters, Joanne and Karen Leach, and they've worked on all the Resident Evils we've done with Mila. And they came to Mexico, they worked on Resident Evil 2, and they are fearless. They do these most amazing stunts. They, we only originally used Joanne, but then as the movies developed and we have Alice clones, and there's a need for more Milas, Karen came on board as well, and she, so between the two of them, we immediately have two Alice clones. So that works very well.
Alice keeps going after Umbrella because A, she feels responsible for the outbreak, and I think, it's one of those things that she can't live with herself if she doesn't help people in some sense survive what happened.
There's a fabulous stunt we have in Resident Evil 4 where they jump backwards off essentially a 10-15 high drop, and they're shooting machine guns as they go. And we did it practically, and they fell 10-15 feet into a stack of cardboard boxes to break their fall. But they don't blink. They run, and then they just jump backwards into the abyss, firing machine guns. They're so cool.
You know, I think in a sense for her to just disappear and try and save herself is against her nature. I mean, she's been trained as, you know, a fighter, and she was working for Umbrella at the beginning, and you know, I don't think she would be able to live with herself if she just went and kind of put her head in the sand, as it were. And you know, I think that's what we love about her character is the fact that, you know, she doesn't give up, and she really wants to redeem herself in a sense. Sean Roberts, who plays Wesker, he's got this presence that just fills the screen, and you know, really fun to work with, and very believable. He's, I think, really made this character come to life, which is so special, you know, for the fans of the games who are really excited to see Wesker on the big screen and really kicking butt and getting into the action, because in the last film, he was a more sedate character who was sitting in a boardroom, and now Wesker really comes to life, and Sean is just doing the most amazing job bringing him, you know, his personality and his character. I mean, we're really lucky to have him.
I remember Paul and I were having lunch, and he'd outlined the story, and you know, he said, well, she does cover a lot of ground, Alice. I mean, she's going from Tokyo to Alaska to LA, and we were, and he had this idea of, which was very Amelia Earhart inspired. You know, plus Alice, there's a sort of existential quality to Alice. She's alone in this world. We had her riding across the desert on her motorbike in the last one, which was very Mad Max, or walking like Lawrence of Arabia in the desert. So we knew there would be sequences when she would be alone before she joined up with the others, and he was thinking, how can we make this interesting? And he had this idea, well, why wouldn't she, you know, steal a plane? And it was it's a great image that you may be the last person on Earth and you're in this aeroplane circling the globe. And of course, it helped us get from A to B to C.
I knew I wanted to go to Alaska because in Extinction, it's established that Claire and Kmart and some survivors head up there, and that Arcadia exists, and this is a safe haven. So I knew that would have to be part of our story to kind of establish that. And there were certainly kind of earlier drafts, or earlier ideas rather, that took place almost entirely in Alaska. You know, I thought it would be an interesting thing to have the undead in the snow and ice. You know, because I thought that was kind of a fresh environment that you'd never seen them in before. But I think the problem with the snow and ice, and you see this in a movie like Whiteout, where you have a very beautiful actress like Kate Beckinsale. But the problem is, when you put her in Antarctica, she has to wear a big puffy jacket and a big hat and a big set of goggles all the time, because otherwise it's not believable. But then you take your beautiful actress that you paid a lot of money for and you want to see how beautiful she is, and she kind of looks like the doughboy running around, right? So, and I didn't want to do that. I mean, I didn't want to take Mila and didn't take Ali and put them in big coats and big hoods and masks, and, you know, why bother even having them in the movie at that point? So Alaska became a very dramatic landscape which we spend time in, but which we pass through, so that we can kind of eventually get to LA, where it's hot and sweaty and sexy.
All right, thank you guys. Here we go. Goodbye. Okay, Mr. Renzetti. Here we go.
Where we pick up in this Resident Evil is that Claire has had some of her memory cleansed away. There has been, the fight between humans trying to survive versus the zombies and the awful Umbrella Corporation that created them. At this point, you realize that Claire has reverted back to her most primal instincts. She is in complete and utter survival mode. So it starts for a really interesting journey for her within this movie. A lot of it is about faith and trust. And it's whether she can believe what someone has told her or whether she needs to remember it and experience it herself. And I think that's really the key to what her struggle is in this movie. It's also the struggle of personal sacrifice, the things that they've lost, the friends that haven't been able to survive with them. I think that the human loss element in this has just broken these characters down. So I think it's a bit of a loss of some of the ideals that they had, some of the hopes, and now it's just kind of a harsher reality.
This is truly the most globe-trotting of Resident Evil movies. The film starts in Tokyo, it moves to Alaska, we then go to Los Angeles, to Hollywood, to Long Beach. So, we cover a lot of ground. And for the first time ever on a Resident Evil movie, we actually went and we shot in all of those places. So we shot in Tokyo, we shot these fantastic glaciers in Alaska, and finally we shot on Hollywood Boulevard, we shot the Hollywood sign, and we went to Long Beach as well and kind of shot down there. So we really covered a lot of ground. This is very much a globe-trotting Resident Evil movie with a broader scope and a broader canvas than the previous films, which had tended to kind of take place in one environment.
That's okay. Here we go. All right, Keith. And action. Action.
Visually, it's outdoors, but the light is all obscured by this haze of ash, in Los Angeles. So, but yet we had to land a practical airplane on the roof, and so we were, should we shoot this outdoors in a parking lot where we won't have great control over the light, or should we shoot it in stage? And if we shoot in stage, is there a stage big enough? There was a stage big enough in Toronto. And it's I forget exactly what it is, but it's a big warehouse that several movies have shot in, and we decided that's where we were going to build a set, and that was the building that we were going to shoot in. And of course, the day we decided that, it burnt down. was in the news the next day. It was big news. The whole thing burnt to the ground, so that was no longer available. So we still figured we would shoot it indoors on stage, and we just had to scale down a little bit the size of our set and go back into previs and figure out how we were going to be able to do it in a smaller environment.
Tape doesn't want to stay taped today.
Tape today?
I'm having a bad tape day. It happens to the best of us.
It's a bad paper towel and index tape. This is not working right now.
All right.
I play Luther West, who is sort of the leader of the survivors who have sort of barricaded themselves in the prison. And as the story, moves along, I think Alice sort of warms up to him, because at first she's a very stoic, powerful woman that comes in that sort of removed from emotions, because I guess in her experience it has hurt more than helped her to be connected to other people on an emotional level. But slowly she warms up to Luther, and she lets herself open up to him on an emotional level as well. And it's an interesting journey, because at first, their relationship is very, distant, and there's something, but it's hard to define. And then slowly, as we progress, they sort of grow on each other.
Resident Evil is more than just being a movie about the undead. It's more than a zombie movie. It's more than a horror movie. The Resident Evil franchise has always had these bigger science fiction ideas. And also it's had the concept of the evil corporation as being the true enemy. And I think those are slightly larger ideas that I think give us an audience that's bigger than just a traditional horror or action horror movie audience. I think it's why the movies resonate and have kind of like survived as long as they have done. And it's why we're on a fourth one, is they have these slightly larger ideas built into them. And the Umbrella Corporation is certainly a big part of that. I would say probably about 70% of the movie was on stage, 20% was on interior location, and 10% was exterior. The technique we used on the movie was we built sets that were big enough that when I was doing close dialogue coverage, you could stay within the set. But whenever you came back to a wide shot, it became a visual effect. And that's a technique that I think gives us tremendous scope, because at the start and the end of every scene there's usually a wide shot that shows you a huge location that didn't physically exist. But when you come in for your tight coverage, every shot is not a visual effects shot, because then the movie becomes unbelievably expensive. So that was a technique that worked very well for us. So the roof of the prison, for example, that was entirely a build on stage. And in a lot of the shots, I think the CG work is very, very good, because there's only a small portion of that roof exists, and quite often you see the entire roof. And it's very hard, even for people who made the film, to tell exactly when the physical set stops and the digital set begins.
Another one of Paul's really interesting requests was that we turn this old 1970s brutalist-style architecture, a building that's a library at the University of Toronto, into a prison. And there was a delicious irony to that, because we then had to find an interior prison, which turned out to be a student center in another university, and turn them both into the prisons where Alice goes to rescue these survivors.
Crystal's the cook, my character. She's the cook there. She sort of cooks up all the powdered eggs, and she tries to be lighthearted with it as well, because, they're surviving on this diet of powdered eggs, which can't be very tasty. So she tries to sort of make it a bit of a joke and add some spices to it as best she can. No, I like scrambled eggs. These were actually powdered eggs as well. I was lucky because I was the only one that didn't actually have to eat the eggs. Yeah, I was cooking them, but Boris and Mila, they had to actually eat the eggs in the scene. And yeah, 5 takes later, I think they were kind of trying their best to pretend that they were eating the eggs and not actually putting anything in their mouth, because they tasted that awful.
There's always challenges when you want to do big action sequences or big scale sequences in an urban environment. We had a lot of those challenges on number 2, which is one of the reasons why we're back in Toronto. Because aside from it looking in number 2 very much like Raccoon City in the game, on this one here, there are a lot of urban environment areas that are playing for Los Angeles that work very well here in Toronto, and we're being given permission to do it. Toronto has been incredibly cooperative to us as filmmakers in doing amazing things. This rooftop is actually based on a building that's at the University of Toronto that Paul saw and fell in love with, the Robards Library, which is this incredible brutalist type of thing. Hard to believe it's a library. And we've actually shot a number of sequences at various University of Toronto buildings because they're just so architecturally amazing. So many of the interiors of the prison, then the whole opening Umbrella Corporation in Tokyo sequence was done at the Dan Pharmaceutical Building at the University of Toronto, which is just this astonishing interior space.
It's about goddamn time. I hate being down here. I'm hearing moving in the walls. Who the fuck are you?
Wendell, what did you hear?
Like I told you, movement.
Where?
Back there.
So let's check it out. I'll be back in a minute. Shall we?
We really tried to kind of bring some new, fresh, and quite big names into the franchise. I mean, that was the idea behind casting Wentworth Miller. Wentworth is a big celebrity and has a big career all of his own and a big following from Prison Break. And I thought, I want to kind of take his following and combine that with Resident Evil.
You were the one flying that plane. Wendell isn't the only one that hears things. Well, I'm glad you made it. Maybe you can talk some sense into these people. Isn't it obvious? I'm not a prisoner. I shouldn't be in here.
There was a derelict roller skating rink that was supposed to have renovated, but the project was abandoned. And it had such interesting architecture that we ended up using it for a variety of sets, like our sewers. We had tunnels in there. We had the jail cell that Chris Redfield is found inside it. And we also had the opening of the movie where the Alices come down into the Umbrella Corp entrance, their garage, so to speak. They were all done in that one roller rink.
Well, I'm very, very involved in the look of my movies. Right from the start, from my very first film, production design is something. If I wasn't a director, I probably would be a production designer. And so it's something that I'm very invested in. And even from the script writing stage, if you look at the script, you find very detailed descriptions of what the set should look like and what the vision for the movie is. Because I feel like the vision for the film is something that it can't just be kind of imposed on the story. It has to kind of come out of the story and come out of the script.
The imagined future in this film really does start with Paul's written word. We really rely on his vision to kind of direct us in what we're creating in terms of design. One of the very interesting things Paul did was create these two solitudes that we dwelt on. One was the Umbrella Corp, and the other one was sort of the outside world, the jail, so to speak, and also Alaska, where we ended up going. What we did was really counterpose those two things, and we tried to find the tension between them and to sort of suggest that each side would want the other side as much as they could. We counterposed the two sides, essentially, making them diametrically opposite, where the Umbrella Corp had everything. And how they get it and how they get it made, we don't know, and nor do we care. It's just cool stuff that they get. And the other people basically have to struggle for survival. So we wanted to kind of have those two things clash against each other. And that's what our imagined future really is, the clash of these two worlds.
containment certainly helps suspense and horror, and it just intrinsically going into a small dark room is a lot scarier than going into a large brightly lit room, especially when the undead are involved, because you can just run away from them if you can see them. And now we've addressed that in a whole variety of ways. One is the undead have evolved, so even though you're in a bigger space, your enemy has become even faster. So it's kind of like you know, it stays balanced, the horror. But certainly as a filmmaker, it is harder to kind of work in a brightly lit, open air environment and try and make that scary. I think it's always the same when you're making movies about monsters. You know, I made a movie about aliens and predators, supposedly the most deadly forces in the universe. But actually, when it boils down to it, what you have on set is two men in rubber suits who can't see where they're going, can barely get out of their chair. So they're not actually that terrifying. And what you realize is what makes an alien terrifying, or what makes a zombie terrifying, or what makes an undead dog terrifying, or a CG creature that doesn't even exist terrifying, is the actor that you're shooting and the job they do at selling terror and putting you in the scene and putting you in their shoes. That's what was so good about Sigourney Weaver in the Alien franchise, is she made you believe this man in a rubber suit was the most terrifying thing you'd ever seen. And in a similar way, Mila makes you believe that these hordes of undead that aren't really there, and these creatures that, you know, are very, you know, slow animatronics, or again, computer generated, and they don't really exist on the set. She makes you believe them.
This is one of the mandibles we've created for the Magini zombies, or burrowing undead. Essentially, they're characters that have been living underground in the sewers and have been using their teeth and fingernails to chew through concrete and through rebar and through dirt. So they've stripped themselves of their lips and some of their facial tissue and of their fingertips, essentially. So they've clawed their way to the surface and they're attacking our heroes. And because they've been mutated by the T-virus, they have these lovely devices coming out of their mouths. So we had to build a number of silicon posable mandibles, essentially, that we could use for dead versions. And we could also use them as lighting references for the CGI team headed by Dan Sperati. Well, the nice thing about their mandibles was it's a design that's very much from the game. So the game obviously is a video game. It wasn't intended to be 3D. So now we're making Resident Evil Afterlife in 3 dimensions. You're having almost the perfect effect to come at you in 3D. Not only is it deadly looking, it's also coming out of someone's mouth, which I don't think anyone is going to be expecting.
Working with Chris, and, you know, Wentworth Miller, who's playing Chris, you can really relate to the relationship between a brother and a sister, and how, you know, they haven't seen each other for so long, and how they really reform their relationship. The questions of, for Claire, whether he really is her brother, whether it's a lie, whether someone's tricking her.
Chris and Claire were very close, and then through the course of everything that's happened, the battle with Umbrella, the zombies, etc., they were separated. I think Chris at this point has probably assumed, naturally, that his sister is deceased. So he's just emerging from a cell where he's been imprisoned for X number of years. He's surrounded by people who are not only strangers, but are the very people who kept him a prisoner. And suddenly there's the face of his long-lost sister. So there's this tremendous moment of shock and recognition, a surge of emotion and tenderness, and that's our challenge as actors, to layer in the relationships and a degree of humanity and believability within a action-adventure context. Playing that moment between Chris and Claire, and then grading their reunion as she struggles with her amnesia, and they struggle against, you know, the zombies and Umbrella and all of these oppositional forces that are ganging up on this small band of survivors, is the challenge and the beauty of a project like this.
I think people will be surprised at how well we've recreated the Axeman, who's a huge character in the game. And we've nailed him. He's exactly how he is in the game, and he's huge.
The Axeman is a pretty impressive character in the movie. He's essentially an undead, technically. But again, he's been mutated by the T-virus. So we're not sure if he's alive or dead. I think he's pretty much alive in the movie.
Ready, and action! Alright, cut! Freeze! 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 When you're coming up, if you have to for air, be careful, as Rick said, put your hands above your head. We do have foam protection on that one, but on the other two.
It's funny, when I first got the script, I called up my agent and I said, it has to be some kind of practical joke. And you meet my character in prison, and the first thing out of his mouth is, I know a way out of here. It felt too familiar. And I thought, I can't play this role, you know, as great as the part is, as terrific as the franchise is, because it's too close to home. I just spent 4 years playing Michael Scofield on Prison Break, and the overlap is just too great. But then I got to thinking about it, and I had a slightly different perspective after a while. I thought, you know what, if you don't know me from Prison Break, then you're going to watch this and, you know, nothing's amiss. If you do know me from Prison Break, it's kind of a cool wink-wink. It's kind of a cool nod, I think, to all the fans of the show who stuck with Michael Scofield on his adventures for 81 episodes to find shades of this character in a very different setup.
Urban pacification vehicle, a UPV, is a term that I made up. I'm quite proud of it. I don't think it really exists. I certainly have never heard it before, but I just thought it had a nice ring to it. And the idea is it's just it's a kind of like a police vehicle with a water cannon mounted on the top of it. Of course, when you make things up and they sound great, it's usually because you heard it at school or something like that. So I thought it was made up. I thought it was my own creation, but it may just be from my subconscious, and somebody calls it a UPV. But that was a term I just threw into the movie, and the vehicle we got is actually a Canadian military vehicle. It looks pretty badass, I must say.
In these kinds of movies, there's a point where your heroes discover a piece of hardware, and normally they then use it to decimate the enemy. So we thought, how much fun if they discover the piece of hardware and then it just doesn't work. So the audience go, oh, right, we've got one of these sequences, but you go, no, you haven't, because it actually doesn't work. And even worse, it's not that it just doesn't work, the whole engine has been lifted out of it. So to me, that's just like having a little fun with the genre, turning it on its head, and it just helps the film be less predictable. So that's the story of the urban pacification vehicle. Because there could easily have been a scene in which they managed to make it work and then drove it from the prison to the ocean, decimating zombies along the way. But we just felt, you know what, we've seen that kind of scene before.
And Norman's great. Norman's just fantastic. He plays Kim Yong, my assistant, and he survived this planet as well. And he's with me in almost everything that I do in this movie. I don't know how to say this, but Norman's so great. The first day we did a scene, and it wasn't really a funny scene, but I think I turned it into something that was kind of funny. And Norman said, "Oh, so I see. We're the comic relief." And I went, "Norman, don't tell them that. Do not tell them that. We're gonna hide that, okay? That's just between you and me."
The prison tower swing is a really exciting effect where Alice basically loads our crew into the elevator and sends them down to safety while the undead crowd has made their way up to the roof and now are chasing her. And she basically detonates the rooftop of the prison and jumps off of it, thus destroying the prison rooftop, taking out most of the undead as well. And she kind of falls to safety, and then lands in the prison yard, and the fight continues. We've created a completely digital prison set in the computer, which will play as a complete double of the prison roof that you see here. In wide shots, that will be a 100% CGI effect, fully animated. We're doing motion capture cycles on actors, stand-in actors, and stunt people to get realistic performances. We've scanned Mila Jovovich's body in a cyber scan. Again, we're employing photographic textures, and so that effect will be an all-in-the-computer effect, which we're very excited and proud to approach it that way.
The visual effects supervisor is a man called Dennis Berardi, who runs Mr. X, which is a Toronto-based company, and he's pretty much worked on my last 5 or 6 films. So he's a key collaborator for me in the movies, and very, very important contributor to the world of Resident Evil. Because a lot of these sets, as I said, we only built 25% of the set, and the other 75% is all Dennis's responsibility. Well, I start working with Dennis very early on, before we've even shot a frame of film, because if you're building a big digital asset, like the prison, for example, doesn't exist anywhere other than in a computer, but it looks photoreal. And in order to get a digital asset to look photoreal, it's really a process that takes at least 6 months just to build the asset before you even start doing the shots. So some of these big shots in the movie, they then take 9 months. Now, the fact is, if you wait until you've shot your movie to then start on the visual effects, you don't have 9 months from the finish of the film to the release of the film. And that's how you get bad-looking visual effects shots, in my opinion. You kind of rush them. So for these big shots, they all had to be planned really in pre-production. So kind of Dennis comes on board very early. He helps me plan those shots. And he's a key contributor into actually which sets get built and which parts of the sets get built. Because we'll have discussions about, do I need to build a back wall here, or can he do it digitally? And then, it becomes as kind of, you get into the nitty-gritty of what does it cost to build a wall for real? What's it going to cost in the digital environment? And then you kind of go with the most cost-effective.
And action! Action! Cut!
Whenever I start a movie, there's different things that you pull out of your arsenal, the different tools that you need to work with. With Resident Evil, a lot of it is the physicality. Knowing how to shoot the guns, doing some of your own stunts, and really making it as real as possible so that while the audience is watching it, they can go on this journey with you. On top of just having, these extremely physical fight scenes, we were shooting out in torrential rain in the middle of this airport hangar where it had turned into about 6 inches of mud. People are slipping and sliding. I am face down in the dirt, and I look up and I see a crew of about 110 people in jeans, pants over them, galoshes, hats, rain gear, covered to the nines, and here I am, bare as bare, face planted, and I'm like, this is my day job? Okay.
He's very clever, I think, in listening to everything that the actors have to say, because it's a collaboration at the end of the day. And I think if you go into something like this too narrow-minded with what you want to do, then I think you close yourself off to a wealth of expression. And so Paul does have a very set idea when he goes on set, because he has it all planned out, but he gives everybody enough rope to be able to develop and flavor their own character. And I think to a large extent with casting, the characters are somewhat driven by the game. There are a lot of cast that are characters taken directly from the game, so the physicality and to some extent the emotional work that they have to do is dictated already by their character. But for the characters that aren't in the game, they have to complement the people who pre-exist. And also, like I was saying before, it needs to be able to be a story that's relatable for people who don't know the game.
She does all of her own fight scenes. I mean, it's actually rare that she doesn't do her stunts. I mean, I would say Mila does 99% of her own stunts. She would do 100%, but I won't let her do that extra 1%. And it's really only things where it's not that she's not capable of it, it's just there's a risk factor that is, in my opinion, unacceptable, so I won't let her attempt it.
Definitely there's a lot of training involved, a lot of strength training for the martial arts part of it, stretching to make sure you're able to actually do the things that are required you know, the actual martial arts moves. Hopefully that translates, and I think it does, because here we are making, you know, number 4 Resident Evil Afterlife, and you know, I think people enjoy these movies, and we enjoy making them. So, you know, it's all one big happy, you know, serendipitous family.
She definitely does a lot of stunt training. She does a lot of work. She does all her own sword work, and all the stunts that you see on camera where she swings a sword and she throws a star. She can do all of those things. So that's a really interesting element that she can pull into it, because she's very physically fit and she's very physically trained. She's good at all the sword fight, at all the weapons fights, and she gets up on the wire work, and those wires pull her high. She's very good at physical work, and she's very enduring at them. I mean, the days are long. She's the core of the movie. She's in everything from dawn till dusk, and we usually shoot in really harsh environments. I don't know if it's a happy coincidence of Paul that he just likes to add additional pain by having really intense environments, but Resident Evil 1 we shot in Berlin in midwinter. That was nice, in lots of concrete bunkers, really pleasant. Resident Evil 2 was in Toronto in midwinter. Had a diving off extremely high buildings, equally pleasant. Resident Evil 3 we shot in Mexicali in July, in the desert. That was excellent. Dawn till dusk, really hot. Scorpions and snakes. We had scorpion and snake wranglers on set every day that had to come in and flush all of the deadly animals out so we could go in and work in 140-degree temperatures. And then Resident Evil 4 in Toronto just before Christmas. So it's a really difficult environment, and then she does all the physical work. So she's a trooper. It's a prep. I think that kind of is really helpful from been working on it for 10 years, because it's kind of like having an alter ego. It's a character, and it's a vein that you need to be able to click back into. And it kind of feels like that in the same sense for me, because it's kind of like Resident Evil is like your ugly sister. It's your ugly sister that's always in the background that you always come back round to. And so I think for Mila, it's like a second character for her. Alice is someone that she has grown with, and we talked about how her character arcs and how she's had to physically grow. And I think it's because it's been such a successful and such a long project. It's something that she can tap into. It's a character she's very familiar with, she's very comfortable with, and she's very good at.
Probably the most important thing for me was the 3D as well. I felt the 3D was going to be the future of cinema, and I wanted us to be kind of on the cutting edge, or the bleeding edge as people keep referring to it, of technology. So we made an investment in 3D, and we actually shot the movie in 3D, and that to me kind of opened up the scope of the movie dramatically. You know, just to give you an idea of the kind of bigger scope, this is the first Resident Evil movie that played on IMAX screens. You know, so again, you know, that's kind of like opening up the size and the scale of the film. What 3D is very, very good at is it's an immersive medium. It really helps with sucking the audience into an environment. So there's depth behind the screen. There's the ability for things to come out of the screen at you. And that's not just for gimmicky effect. That's to actually immerse you and bring the audience, drag them into the environment. And the more you immerse the audience in the environment, in these scary locations, the scarier they become. And the easier it is for me as a filmmaker to actually scare people and make them jump. I wrote a three-dimensional movie. I mean, when I was writing it, I knew it was going to be a 3D movie. And I tried to write situations and environments and locations into the screenplay that I felt would really play very, very well with 3D. So, you know, in 3D, like big wide aerial shots look fantastic, for example, in 3D. They're not particularly scary. But once Mila lands and she goes into these environments, you know, you have a series of environments which are like long tunnels, elevator shafts. It doesn't have to be a big environment to work really well in 3D.
Paul wanted, you know, Wesker's quarters and Wesker's lab and Wesker's environment to be very, very slick, very high-tech, very minimalist, and just sort of stark white all around him. And so Wesker's lab, in the end of the picture, where, you know, one of our big fights takes place, that's what it is: white floors, white ceiling, white walls, which typically is a little difficult, you know, photographically.
The big white room is actually a small white room. What we did was we only built like 2 walls, so like one corner, and then everything in the film is either, when you see any wider than that, it's a visual effect, or when you see reverses that are close-ups on people, it's what's called a French reverse, which is where you just cheat the reverse. So instead of actually, you know, moving the camera over there and shooting somebody here, you just move the person slightly and shoot against exactly the same wall, but make it look slightly different. Look at the bomb, take everything in, and then you would walk straight. Yeah. This walkway goes all the way to the next set of pressure doors.
Do I walk into the green?
No, I want you to walk all the way to the white, don't step into the green, then the shot's over.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Of course, now I have to wait. The guns are coming for Whitby, but
Are real guns?
sorry. The handles.
My back sits different too.
At least we know who we can thank.
Always once afraid.
And action. Door. Action. Door.
They had wigs on this morning, and they're like, they look better bald. So we're trying to cover up some of the spots that we didn't get last night with paint.
This is definitely one of the most intensive films I've had for action, and it seems there's always a mix of action and horror, action and thriller, and you know I just did a crazy fight scene that was choreographed by Gary Powell, who worked on Casino Royale, and a movie I did with Mel Gibson, and that's a lot of hand-to-hand stuff. Whereas this it's all about being precision, precise. Albert Wesker with his superhuman strength and power. There's a different sort of grace and elegance that comes to it, and it's beautiful. It's not so much a dirty sort of in-your-face kind of scuffle, but rather, I mean, we're shooting at 200 frames a second. You get to see all of the motion and the camera moving in through, taken right from the video game. So it's yeah, I mean, there was a certain amount of pressure to make sure that you do this right, and we had the time to be able to do it, and we had the equipment, and we had all the right elements to do it, and I guess we'll see if the fans agree.
Some mean coordinator said no run for Brody. I know he's the big working dog, but no run for Brody. He's apparently this crap on his truck. Which one of the college are we gonna call?
The final scene in the White Room where Wesker is fighting Chris and Claire, that is very much taken from Resident Evil 5, the video game. A lot of the moves are exactly the same. And we did that for two reasons. One was I thought if you're a fan, you would really appreciate, seeing that brought to life on the cinema screen. And the other is, even if you don't know Resident Evil, it just looks so damn cool. When I showed it to my fight choreographer, to Rick Forsyth, he's like, wow, that's great. And then I said, good, I'm glad you like it because we're going to do it. And he's like, but these are digital people. I can't make human beings do that. I'm like, well, you better figure out how because we're going to do it. And, so he worked very closely with our wire riggers and with my director of photography, Glenn McPherson, to work out, particular rigs, particular camera moves so we could kind of recreate this insane off-the-hook fight sequence shot for shot from the game and put it into the movie. And that, that kind of challenge, no one's happy to be given that kind of challenge, but, Rick rose to the occasion and I think he really, really delivered. It was a lot of choreography from the actors. They were very, very well rehearsed. And one of the things that I love is there's one shot that goes around the fight, like twice. It's all one take, and which lets you know how well the actors were rehearsed. We did it about 30 times, I think, to really get the shot that we wanted, because it's all one continuous take. And we had a very exhausted cameraman by the end of it, carrying that heavy 3D camera around.
I do wombo. What is it? Wombo. Here we go. Check.
Probably one of the best or worst, depending on how you look at it, things that happens to Wesker is swallowing a double-barrel short sawed-off shotgun and then having, Alice pull the trigger. Devastating, you'd think. Not so much. You can't kill Wesker, so that's fun, because you can keep coming, keep hitting him. It's fine. It's no big deal. Another day at the office, right? And ever since, being knee-high to a grasshopper, watching all of these, even watching Arnold way back in the day and watching Bruce Willis, all these guys, and just, hoping that if dreams really do come true, this is the prime example of it, because this is what I've always wanted to do, and like I said, I have to pinch myself because I'm actually here and I'm actually doing it. So, I've been training my entire life for this.
I think it's not just about the evil corporation and the individual, because I think that exists in any decade. I think there is a fundamental distrust of large corporations, though, and the way they use the environment and the way they use science, which probably means that people particularly relate to the umbrella corporation. I mean, the umbrella corporation, just as they do so much harm, they are so powerful they could have done so much good. But there was a moment within that corporation where they kind of had the key and decided to go down the dark. They decided to open the dark door, not the light door.
This set came about because of one of Paul Anderson's requests, actually. Initially, this was scripted as a V-22, an existing plane that the U.S. military uses. So we started to design one that we could use for our purposes, so we could wild out walls, etc. We also tried to get a real one for the exteriors and found it very troublesome. We couldn't get one, and time wasn't enough to sort of build everything. So Paul basically suggested, why don't we build our own plane? Why don't we do an Umbrella Corp cool-looking plane as opposed to a clunky U.S. Army V-22? So that's how this set came about, and it was just inspiration like that that sort of drove us to design some of the nicer sets we have. We've really tried to give us a basic visual delight everywhere we see. So no matter where you look in this plane, what I try to do a lot is design with the lighting in mind. So, for example, if we look up above us, lighting comes through the top of us, lighting comes from below us, and we've lit up the sides as well. So when the DP walks in here, this plane is practically lit for him because he doesn't really have any places to put other lights.
I toyed with giving the ending of this film a slightly different spin to the other Resident Evil films. It's always been a staple in Resident Evil movies that the movie ends with a big pull-out shot. And that was kind of established at the end of the first movie, where Mila walks out into devastated Raccoon City and with a shotgun, and then the camera pulls back and back and back, and you see the expanse of the devastated city behind her. And I always liked that ending, and I know fans of the film really responded to it, and they wanted to know what was going to happen next. And so we kind of took our You know, we took that to the next level with the second movie, where we had another big pullback shot, again from Mila's face, but this time we pull back from a car and then we go up into the sky, then we eventually kind of leave Earth, the Earth completely, and we end up in orbit with an umbrella satellite coming by. The third movie again was a pullback, but this time it was from two Milas. It's the real Mila and the clone Mila, and they're looking into a room which we haven't seen before, and again the camera pulls back and back and back, and we reveal there are hundreds of clones, which are then present in this movie. So, you know, I thought, you know, the end of this film traditionally would be a big long pullback shot, but I kind of, in the first screenplay, and this is the same one where I took out the zombie dogs, I didn't have that pullback shot. So I got 2 telephone calls from Clint Culpepper. The first one was, "Where are the dogs? They're great. You've got to have them in the movie." And then about half an hour later, I got another call. "I got to the end of the script. Where's the big pullback shot? It's not the end of a Resident Evil movie." So, and he was completely correct as well. So I wrote a brand new ending, which again is Mila turning, this time with Ali and Wentworth as well. And the camera pulls back and back and back. So it's the traditional pullback, but this time rather than seeing a devastated city, what we see is the ship, the Arcadia, and we see fleets of V-22s entering and circling around the ship, and suggesting that Umbrella are about to launch a major assault on our heroes. You know, I know a lot of the fans really missed Jill Valentine from the third movie, from Extinction, and wanted to know what happened to her character and wanted to know why Sienna Guillory hadn't come back. So in this movie, I thought, well, you know what, everybody wants it. She definitely has to come back. So, you know, I called Sienna and I said, "Do you mind? I want you to come back. And I want you to play evil Jill Valentine." Because in the new video game, you know, there's this character which is Jill, but she's gone to the dark side. And it's a very striking look, the cat suit that she has, and, you know, the kind of evil controlling medallion that she has that's kind of, that's stuck into her skin. The scarab, as we call it. And she loved the idea, so in a kind of hidden ending, halfway through the credits, we see that character from the video game, we see her return, and obviously imply that if there is another movie, she will be back and she'll be working for the wrong side.
So in this Resident Evil Afterlife, I am not the same Jill Valentine. I am a completely different Jill Valentine. This is Jill Valentine, the evil, Umbrella-owned, scarab-wearing, scarab-controlled Jill Valentine. She's darker, she's meaner. I don't think she takes new prisoners, and she certainly shoots to kill, as always. But not necessarily for the right side. This is the scarab. I don't know whether you can see. It looks pretty painful. It's not. It's really cool.